I have listened to Dokozan. I've listened to Pindiri. I've listened to Professor. I've listened to the professor that has just made the presentation. And I say one more time, I feel good to be in Africa. I feel like saying I wish they would have had more time so that they would talk further and further. And that these people who have spoken so well, their background is not that different from that of mine. For too many years I've listened to voices from people who have nothing in common with me in my culture. Today I'm listening to people with whom I can truly identify myself. Amen. The title in your program says, "The Triumph and Prosperity of Education in Africa." This is a big topic which talks about education in Africa in terms of early childhood education, in terms of primary, secondary, tertiary, and university education. And then I realized if I were to say all that must be said about education in all these phases, there would be no time available to do so. And so I have chosen to focus my presentation on university education in Africa since independence days. Even then, I can only talk about this topic in terms of a very small proportion of what I'm supposed to talk about. Even as it is, so be it. University education in Africa since independence days. Having assembled here to celebrate 50 years of independence and African unity makes us proud as Africans. Over 100 years ago, an American Christian woman by the name Ellen G. White stated that we have nothing to fear for the future except we forget the way God has led us in the past. As Africans and others present here, we are here today because we have not forgotten our past. We are here because we have no fear for the future of the continent of Africa. If prior to independence, African countries worked and struggled for political and economic independence, then during post-independence years, they have truly worked towards educational independence, which is an emancipating force in all human endeavors. Over 20 years ago, if I can get my book, over 20 years ago, a Canadian visiting professor by the name David Bain, and me, and I struggled to say, should I say and me, or should I say and I? Grammatically, I suppose I'm supposed to say David Bain and I. But to me, in practice, it sounds better to say David Bain and me. While at the University of Transkei, we published an article in the International Education Review, whose editorial headquarters is in Geneva, Switzerland. In this article that we published jointly, we focus on education in Southern Africa. Not Africa, in Southern Africa. That was our topic. Now I could read the quotation from here, but the writing is small, so I can't see it that clearly. And so I typed it. We pointed out that Southern African countries have placed high priority on education as a key to individual and national development. Correspondingly, large government budgets have been allocated to education. As a result, since independence, made monumental improvement in spite of the enormous limitations of resources in terms of economic, human, technological, and material. A recent bank report, and that recent bank report that we were quoting was produced in 1988, stated that African educational development since independence has been spectacular and impressive. This is the World Bank talking about Africa. The World Bank has not been known to be so positive about what happens in this continent. But at this time, they were impressed to state, and they were compelled to say, the development of education in Africa since independence was spectacular and impressive. Thereafter, there was another person by the name Heyman. And as I look at that person, I realize for sure he's not an African, because Heyman is not an African name. What did he have to say about education in Africa? We say, according to Heyman, the expansion of the educational system is unique, not in Africa, not in Europe, not elsewhere. It is unique in human history. In human history, that is Africa. He points out, he goes on to say, in the past 15 years, the educational system, the educational growth rate in Africa has doubled that of other developing countries in Asia and Latin America. Yes, African nations have made monumental improvements in the world of education that are impressive, spectacular, unique in human history, and exceed what had happened in Asia and Latin America. In no uncertain terms, the cited education endeavors have been superseded by leaps and bounds in light of what has taken place in the last 30 years. God bless Africa. Secondary education is very important for the establishment and continuation of tertiary and university education. Secondary school students are a sole resource for the supply to meet the demand of tertiary and the university education in terms of admissions. Otherwise, higher learning institutions could as well close down indefinitely. This brings to memory the Tanzania experience shortly before independence in 1961. President Julius Nyerere made a recommendation to the soon-to-depart British government for the establishment of a university in Tanzania. The British were in Tanzania for 40 years. They never built a single university in that country. Their response to the requests and recommendation of Mwalimu Julius Nyerere was of ridicule. They asked Mwalimu Julius Nyerere as to where he was going to get students to admit into such a university. Their answer was based on the fact that there weren't students in the country that would have justified the creation of a national university. But this did not deter the determination for the establishment of a national university. Therefore, the University of Dar es Salaam was established the same year the British granted independence to the Trust Territory of Tanganyika, as it was known then. But on reflection, the British were not that far off the point in their answer to the request of Julius Nyerere. Insofar as when this university was opened, it had no more than 17 students, 17 students for the first year. I go back in history 50 years ago that we are celebrating, but there were others who chose not to come back. Prior to independence, and for some even after independence, they had no university of their own at all. The rare countries that had such institutions may have had 1 or 2 universities. After independence, most of them made sure that they had at least 1 university to cater for their national needs. The 1 or 2 established universities then were a monopoly, as they remained the only universities for over 20 years. And during those 20 years, there was hardly increase in enrollment for various reasons, particularly financial reasons and manpower limitations. Such a universities, for your information, were almost exclusively staffed by expatriates for many years. Yes, that was the reality of higher education then, and it remains part of the history of higher education in Africa. In the past 3 decades, the landscape of higher education has undergone what I would refer to as a total transformation. All steered under the leadership of Africans themselves in charge of their destiny. 3 decades later, there is hardly a single country in Africa that does not have a university of its own. Those that had 1 or 2 which monopolized the scene of higher education for close to 20 years, they have been surpassed at a supersonic speed. Nigeria, which had 3 universities at independence, now has 110 universities. Tanzania, which had only 1 university, University of Dar es Salaam, today prides in having 40 universities. Kenya, which had only the University of Nairobi, now has 53 universities. Zambia, which had only the University of Zambia, has 19 universities. Rwanda, which hardly had a university, today has 30 universities. Ethiopia, which had only the Haile Selassie University, now has 22 universities. Ghana, which might have had 1 or 2 universities, now prides in 24 universities. Egypt has 17 universities. Even those which have not been mentioned, they now have universities that far exceed those they had at any time in their history of higher education. It is not a question of expansion of geographical space all over the countries. It is also the men and the women enrolled in such a universities that are immensely amazing and overwhelming numerically. They hold the future of Africa as a trust in their hands. If there is nothing else Africans can be proud of, they ought to take pride in this spectacular achievement, as it is truly the work of their own hands and minds. The title of the topic that appears on your program is a replica of this publication, The Triumph and Prosperity of Education in Africa. It is referred to as a book, but to me, it is between a book and an encyclopedia. It has all that I have said, it has all that I have not said, and more. Before you leave the conference, before you leave Pretoria, before you leave South Africa, ensure that you take or buy a single copy as a souvenir. I have this as my free copy, but when I leave this conference, I'm going to purchase 6 copies to share and give to friends and colleagues.
How much?
Let me tell you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you so much. Colleagues, I'm speechless. I don't know what to say, but my observation tells me that as these presentations were being given, and the smiles, the noddings, and the gossip, which I was observing, are indicative of the fact that whatever has been said actually managed to get space in one of the millions of the neurons in your brains. Where it will be located, I don't know. But my wish is to see whatever thing that was discussed or presented now to be located on your long-term memory. So that, one, you can be able to recognize each other. Two, you can be able to recall what has been said, because what has been said is the only thing that is going to inspire you to write more about Africa. I don't want to spoil your patterns of interpreting what has been said, but I just want now to really reduce myself as one of the conference participants. It was an honor and pleasure to really facilitate this session. I think I've enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed it. Kofi said, let us mingle and reinterpret what has been said. Thank you very much. Thank you.